Shots. Yo quiero de esos Dippin' Shots.
Both of them taking it into the vertical in the long dogfight.
Dippin'
Those turbojet
Shots.
engines, pretty early on, the Klimov RD-45 turbojet, an improved version of the original engine. The Russians actually had a lot of problems with the early jets. They had to reverse engineer the from the reliable Rolls-Royce knee. And how it happened is kind of an interesting story. Russian designers had captured much of the German aircraft design documents after World War II, but they couldn't get that reliable jet engine with any thrust above about 2,500 pounds, pretty low thrust. So the Russian aerospace leaders asked Stalin if they could go buy the Nien engine from the Brits. They were very impressed with it. Stalin replied, quote, "What fool would sell us his secrets?" Well, sure enough, to Stalin's surprise, the British did sell the Russians the engine, and they got a license to actually manufacture the engine. They reverse engineered it, and that was how the Russians were able to step up their capability with turbojets on their modern fighter aircraft. First combat was in the skies over Korea in
¿Quieres tu
1950.
raspberry?
No, raspberry de ella.
Yo quiero de cherry.
The MiG would outclimb, outturn, and fly higher than the early F-86s, but below 26,000 feet, the F-86 was marginally better. About 18,000 of the MiGs were built in Russia, Poland, China, and Czechoslovakia. Many of the MiGs that are out on the circuit are Chinese built. At least 20 of them are still licensed as Woomers. Now the MiG-15 UTI, called the Midget, was the most common variant produced. With no trainer version for the MiG-17 and the MiG-19, the MiG-15 UTI, the two-seater, became the Warsaw Pact trainer until well into the 1970s. Now remember Yuri Gagarin, the first person to go into space? Actually, Gagarin was killed in 1968 flying this exact type of aircraft, the MiG-15 UTI. The first air-to-air kill with an AIM-9 Sidewinder was with a Taiwanese F-86 shooting down a MiG-15. They originally designed to counter U.S. bombers like the B-29, and they even tested it against the captured B-29. They carried two 23mm cannons with only 80 rounds, as well as a single 37mm cannon with 40 rounds. The aircraft you see before you was built in 1952 in China, and it arrived in the U.S. in the 1980s. Circumstance of the purchase and everything a little hazy. Back in the 50s, we had a program called Operation Moolah, as in money. We offered $100,000 and political asylum to the first pilot to fly a MiG out for us. And the West got his first close-up look at a MiG-15 in 1953 when a North Korean pilot, Do Kum-sok, he defected to the U.S. Nice looking formation path, Chris Fahey on Steve Hinton's wing. Once we got a hold of the MiG-Mini, it was test flown by many of the U.S. pilots out at Edwards Air Force Base, Southern California, including Chuck Yeager. Now the Soviets were interested. They would never admit to any participation in the Korean War, and therefore, as a result, the U.S. Air Force Museum has the aircraft today because the Russians refused to take the aircraft back. They didn't want to acknowledge ever having lost the aircraft. MiG-15 served in virtually every air force in the communist bloc, including those clients in Latin America, Africa, and the Middle East. And Planes of Fame owns 3 MiG-15s, this one being the only air award with 2 more on spec each, but you can catch those aircraft at the show May 6th and 7th. Well, we saw that North American P-51, their first effort at building a fighter. This is one of the early efforts at building a jet fighter. The F-86 Sabre there, the second aircraft with the yellow tips on the wing. Considered by many to be one of the greatest flying aircraft, Bob Hoover, the late great Bob Hoover. Famous stunt Kyle flew in the wing of Yeager during his supersonic, said that was his favorite aircraft he ever flew. It was developed in 1944 in response to a request for a single-seat high-altitude fighter. The designer, Edgar Schmood, was also the designer of the P-51 Mustang, one of the designers. The Navy had the straight-wing FJ Fury jets from North America, and this was derived from that, because those German advances we talked about in swept-wing research led to that classic 35-degree wing sweep. The XP-86 The prototype first flew on October 1st, 1947, just a few days before Gators broke the sound barrier in the X-1. The F-86 entered service with the U.S. Air Force in 1949. Many versions were built with the F-86F, like the one you see here today, being labeled the Ultimate Day Fighter. 2200 model F models were built. They had the bigger engine with the GE-J47 and about 6,000 pounds of thrust. This one has the larger wing house, called a 6.3 wing. About an extra 6 inches near the root and an extra 3 inches on the wing. The wing tip. No leading edge slats. And they actually did increase. I was talking to Steve Hinton 2 nights ago. He said they increased the sweep on the wing to 37 degrees for the F model. And it had just that 2-degree change in sweep cured a number of the handling characteristics that were poor on the F-86 aircraft. F-86 was later given the mission of tactical nuclear alert. Now, if you may be familiar with the F-86D, called the Sabre Dog, it was actually the version that was most produced. Some people say it was the...
¿Ese es agua de verdad o es un espejismo? Ese es un espejismo, es agua de verdad.
Also, a long fuselage was mounted in afterburner. And even though they're both considered F-86 is only about 25% of the parts that were into the D model can be used or manufactured for the rest of the F-86.
Eran todos esos soldados.
Now keep in mind the Sabre was a primary air-to-air fighter during the Korean War.
Cómetelo.
Going head-to-head against these Russian-designed MiG-15s.
Vamos con Ana. Que te lo comas, vente. Vente,
Good look at the size difference between the two aircraft.
No quieres nada, vente.
You've really got to look inside the MiG-15 cockpit to appreciate actually how small that is. I can barely. I've got to go sit in one recently, and I almost couldn't squeeze into the cockpit. It is. I'm a pretty average sized guy, and it was quite a squeeze to get into that. Don't know that I want to go fight a war in, that's for sure. Although it was the Korean War, most of its combat missions were apparently flown by Soviet and Chinese pilots over in MiG Alley. But the better training of the U.S. pilots paid off. In fact, 39 of the 40 Korean War aces flew, you got it, the F-86. Now coming in from the left, as Chris and Steve carved down, picking up the airspeed towards around 400 miles an hour for the formation photo pass.
Como que es gente también que está allá, Eri. Yo creo que se me hace que rentan aquellas, mijo. Moti, se voy a echar las tablets.
The J-47 is working against it in a visual fight. Over the smoke, allowing them to pick them up early, possibly. F-86 are also flown by Pakistan, Portugal, the UK, Australia, Canada, Germany, Japan, the Netherlands. And many were built under license in Canada, Australia, and Japan. The planes of famed Sabre you see before you today, built in 1952, the exact same year that the MiG was built. Did not see any combat, though. It was overhauled in 1961, got that new wing, and then it was sold to Argentina, to their Air Force in the late 1970s. Aircraft collector Tom Freakin bought the aircraft in the late 1980s, and he donated to the Planes of Fame Museum in 1997. Well, the Air Boss has a situation going up here, and I just heard on his radio that the aircraft are calling gear down as they roll in for a left base to final to land on runway 8 here at El Centro. While they're rolling on in there, folks, I want to give you one last opportunity to start to roll over and grab some food, grab some ice cream or shaved ice, drinks, whatever you like, because we just got a headline act coming up that you are, I know what you're here to see.
Agárralo tú, Catrín.
They'll be taking over here in just a few minutes.
Aquí no me está lloviendo.
On the landing roll, Chris Fahey in a MiG-15 UTI. Fenton. Until about 7 years ago, he was the youngest person to ever win the unlimited gold in Reno at the age of 26. And then 7 years ago, that record was achieved by a 21-year-old. Somebody by the name of luckily beaten by his own son, becoming the youngest person to ever win the unlimited gold in the Reno area. You about ready for the next act to crank up here? Oh, whenever you are, my friend. I'm looking forward to this. Well, I get to actually relax on this next act and just enjoy the teaching. Might even have a cold water down here. That's just about what the doctor orders. Shout out to all the performers here living on base. One of my next door neighbors, it turns out, is Blue Angel number 3 Paris. Just shot his lovely wife, and they were very accommodating to us. We ran out of ice here that I wanted to thank them for helping us keep our party going. And it was great to meet down and talk to them the other night.
Al rato me pago.
Es una hora de lo que le digo. Come algo, hijo, lo que quieras. Si quieres a lo que te toque, yo lo pago. Vamos a juego. Ahí está.
The next voice still here on the microphone, we have Blue Angel number 7, Brandon Hemler. As he kicks off for you the start of the 2017 air show season for the United States Navy's flight demonstration team, the Blue Angels.